Sunrise over British suburbia. And as the light intensifies, a familiar scene is revealed below. The tapestry of the great British allotments. A well-established site, Hurstville allotments in Coventry, like most allotments around the country, are caught in their urban environment. Here, to one side, a major A road, an artery into the city. Whilst a primary school, a playing field, and an avenue of Victorian terraced housing complete the enclosure. But in this green oasis, a whole array of horticulture and cultivation can be seen. Some lined up in neat little rows, others not so, but every allotment here, these plots form the perfect escape from the rat race of the city. At over 100 years old, apparently this used to be an orchard, and apple trees and fruiting bushes persist. But we are going to get our feet on the ground sometime in early spring, about the second week of April. And as we do so, there's a level of expectancy in the air, and by the sounds of things, some of the allotmenteers are already hard at work. A speckled wood butterfly warms its body, fresh from overwintering in a shed nearby.
That's it. Yeah. This won't get the baby a bonnet. This won't get the baby a bonnet, will it, Dill? No. Oh, that's table. What's your table?
In a quieter spot, I find an elderly vixen. In fact, she's familiar to many, and actually christened by a few. At 6 years old, she's 3 times the average age of an urban fox. She's known as Frankie. Frankie has just had her 3rd litter of cubs. And once she's happy with what she surveys, she'll return to the entry of the den to lure out her litter. She and her cubs would have spent the first 5 weeks of their lives underground in the den, them solely surviving on her milk, whilst she would have been fed by the dog fox father who'd have left food at the entry. In the last few days, she and the cubs have been straying farther afield. But sadly, this has brought about a tragedy. What was once a litter of 3 now numbers only 2. One of the cubs has been lost to misadventure, drowning in one of the water butts that are numerous around the allotment site. This an example of how she will be partially reliant on the cubs' own assessments of risks and dangers to keep them safe in the first few weeks and months of their fragile lives. For the purpose of the film, and thankful that Frankie had already been christened, I decided that every new Fox family member that we were to meet would in turn have to be christened themselves. For the pair of cubs, I decided to look at the delta markings on the muzzle. And with that, I came up with the names Smudge and Dash. Sat in the undergrowth, stealthily poised, a nursery web spider, and despite her name, she isn't reliant on a web to catch her prey. She'll sit here motionless, waiting for a viable prey item to pass her by. Then she'll strike. At the end of this filming day, I was to meet the fourth member of our Fox family. A striking 1-year-old vixen. No need for muzzle markings here. I was to use the richness of her fur to christen her Whisky. Whisky is Frankie's daughter from last year, and it isn't unusual for non-breeding female family members to stick around and act as a nanny. A few days later, I was to return to the allotments. I was aware at this point that potentially I wouldn't be back for 10 to 12 weeks due to filming commitments. All seemed quiet at first. The spring blossom hanging high in the trees. Soon I was to catch up with one of the smaller members of our Fox family, Smudge. Clearly weaned from mum's milk, eating what appears to be toast. And whereas Smudge was, I fully expected that Dash wouldn't be far behind. The lack of dignity afforded by play quickly telling me that these pair were both female, sisters. course, wherever they may be, Mum would never be far behind. Curiously, both cubs initially heading for Mum's teats, but of course that now is history. This play and frolicking around serves a much greater purpose, telling the cubs the abilities of their own bodies, and of course, more importantly, leading the way for them to be active predators. Movements and actions to be played out many, many times in the future, but for real. Watching this scene unfold, it did occur to me though about how old Frankie was and how exhausting this must be for her, and I wondered, would this be her final litter? One thing I was sure of, that on my return in about 3 months' time, young Smudge here would look like a completely different cub indeed. And so it was. Allotment life had moved on at a great pace in my absence, and attentions were being drawn to the nemesis of the garden slug. And in no small way, the snail also. Battle lines being drawn, but it appeared all the hard work was paying off. Back at the newly found nursery den, I was to meet the 5th and final member of our fox family. Bulkier, heavier, darker, the dog fox himself, and happily with a neat little spot on his muzzle. Spot has been a very attentive father, but now with the cubs at over 4 months old and far more independent, he himself has gone a little bit aloof, disappearing sometimes for 2 to 3 days, and this was one such occasion. Back on the plots, some of the very first harvests were being reaped, and starling and blackbird were waiting patiently for discarded invertebrate or worm. Whilst the year's first new potatoes were being bagged for tea time. Didn't take long for young Dash the cub to smell her dad's return, and the two were reunited after a few days apart. But Dad has an ulterior motive to hang around the entry of the den here amongst the potato flowers. For here he has cached some food, and time has come to retrieve it, the prospect of food exciting both the sisters. Dad is away with his booty before there's any time to share. Curiously, it looks like a young hedgehog, a hoglet, and the only type of hedgehog that a fox could actively predate, due to the heavy spines of the adult. The whole episode leaves Dash looking a bit mystified and miffed that a potential meal was there just under her nose. Another lesson to learn. The fox has a challenger for most prolific predator on the allotments, the domestic cat. By the end of July, when fledglings abound, then the hunting is good. Another predator on the prowl, surprisingly, is a wasp, chasing our speckled wood butterfly, caught in a cabbage net. Worryingly, the end of the month also sees Frankie devolving herself from family and territory, lying up, hiding almost, only in one allotment, eating only cached food, and looking simply exhausted. In the old greenhouse, as old as the allotments themselves, the first of the fruit is ripening up. On allotment 28, the mood though is less than positive. Marcus is dearly missing his lunchtime date, one which he's kept for many years. For 3 consecutive days, Frankie hasn't come visiting.
Yeah, man.
A Hersal Allotments veteran, Marcus has a quite considerable claim to fame. Back in 1975, he made the final of Opportunity Knocks with Huey Green, and came second only to, as he puts it, that Scouser Tom O'Connor.
Bloody hell she is. I don't know where she is.
Despite her continuing absence, Frankie's meal, as always, is being religiously prepared.
Terrible, man. Bloody hell she gone.
It is immediately obvious that the sadness that Marcus feels is both genuine and deep, and a testament to the relationship he's built with his fox.
I think I'm gonna see if I find some of them snap.
Poring over old photos of Frankie and previous foxes doesn't seem to do the trick. But he has an interesting tale to tell.
One day I went over that allotment over And when I reach, I see this little cub get caught in a net. He couldn't get his head out. Bloody hell. What do I do? And he's got his mouth open and the teeth at the moment little like that. So I pat him on the head. I said, calm down. I go look for a knife in this guy's shed, cut the card, and free him. And he's take. It's not like she. She usually come regular, on a regular basis. Sometimes she late, but she does come. 2 days now I'm looking for this bloody fox and I don't know where she is. I can't believe this. Where the bloody hell is she?
On my return to the allotments a few days later, the first fox to which I was to have an encounter was not one of our family. A stranger. Down by the nursery den, I found a vixen. One probably not more than a year old, and with a neat black tip to her tail. There's every possibility that this vixen is nomadic, and can sense the senior years of Frankie and her vulnerability. Is this encroachment on our family's territory then a risk to Frankie and the integrity of her family? Sensing a stranger in their midst, other family members were quick to react, Spot first marking the territory. Shortly followed by Whisky, again marking the territory. But sadly no sign of Frankie.
I don't know.
That afternoon was to see a social highlight of the allotment year. Down on Michelle and Pete's plot, it was time to harvest the first of the rudder beans.
Marcus gave me a bottle of homemade parsnip wine. Nearly bloody finished me off. I was asleep in the chair at 9:30, and I was drinking it with lemonade as well.
It was lovely. Never tasted anything like it. I have tasted homemade wine and beer.
A happy and rewarding affair. Everyone seems to get stuck in, and with plenty of cups of tea to hand.
Cup of tea time. Was it?
That's not bad, is it? For just for us three. Got them three up there yet.
Being one of the few dogs partial to a rudder bean, Dylan makes his move.
You haven't been a good boy this morning, have you? You've been a rat bag, haven't you? Right.
Was it? Washing up.
Down in the wooded copse, it's turning out to be an eventful afternoon for our cubs. It's Flying Ant Day. Both of our sisters taking it in turns to pursue their exciting new quarry. That evening, down on plot 23, Spot the dog fox senses our stranger's return. In fact, Black Tip is lurking to the rear. Thankfully and finally, Frankie is driven from her convalescence to follow Black Tip's trail, first to the nursery den, and then to plot 23. Where Black Tip makes an approach. Yelping her presence at first, Frankie is swift and sure in her response, but takes a nasty nip to her snout in the process. Overawed and cowering, Black Tip now makes good an escape, but only into the path of Spot. The following day, back on plot 28, Marcus seems aware of a presence that he's sorely missed. Heading back to the caravan, he bides his time until, in the shadows of the greenhouse, he spots Frankie. Marcus attempts to remind her, throwing her directly some food. But Frankie, now bearing scars to her snout from the previous night's altercations, seems cautious at first. Seemingly needing time to remind herself about the previous relationship, she eventually takes the food. Marcus, of course, is over the moon. Confident now and remembering her role in this relationship, Frankie returns to take the whole course. Mid-August sees temperatures soar. And some of the blooms, the big yellow flowers of the marrow family, have yet to be pollinated. Thankfully, to the centre of the allotment site, 2 beehives are active. The worker bees, all female, have a lifespan of 8 weeks. During this time they'll fly 50 to 60 miles a day, possibly to 100 blooms or more. During their lifespan they'll make 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. On entering the marrow flower, they'll head to the holes at the base, sized just so. Effort is required to reach the nectar below, arching of backs, causing brushing against the stamen, and a coating of pollen. On then to the next bloom, and hopefully to pollination. We have to remind ourselves that 70% of what we eat is reliant totally on pollination, and that one dip of our little finger into the honey jar is the result of 12 bees' lives. A week or so later, and back in a now more peaceful plot 23, we find Molly and Graham. Frankie's aware of Molly and Graham, and they're familiar with her. It could be said that Frankie is over-familiar. But packing up after their early session, Frankie could be sure that Molly and Graham possibly have left her a treat, although they don't like to make it easy all of the time. And today's treat has been left at an elevation, halfway up the apple tree. This will test Frankie's resurgence. Well, it seems that Frankie is back to full fitness. Overnight on the allotments, as we've seen, can carry quite a bit of activity. But there is other life on the move, obviously, other than that of the fox family. And through this knot on Pete's shed, and some spilt grain from overzealous bird feeder filling, something is tempted on this very night that possibly we could never have expected. Small sounds suggest that something is on the move, and before too long the face of a rat appears. But this rat is small, with an extremely long tail, and it is charcoal black. This appears to be a black rat. Not the common brown variety, but a black rat that could take the status as the rarest animal in Britain, with a very particular diet of soft fruit and grain. Black rats can occasionally be found outside of their dockland concentrations, in places where, well, that once were orchards. Down on the lawn of plot 23, a more familiar mammal, that of the hedgehog, and this one just out of the way in time. First light sees play between our sisters, Dash and Smudge, reach new heights. Now virtually adult-sized, the potential risk of injury is very real. The intense heat of an early morning in late August has the dew evaporating in every exposed area. One of the sisters seems to be rejuvenant, victorious almost. Where Smudge is full of physical prowess and playfulness, almost predictably her sister Dash, down in the copse, has injured herself. Her rear right leg is strained, and she limps painfully through the undergrowth. Any visitor this early in the morning to the allotments is likely to meet John. Down on plot 62, John always keeps to a certain breakfast date, as he's done so for years.
Got the breakfast ready for her. Now they was doing a lot of chasing yesterday. Come on, Cookie. Oh. Come on, breakfast. Come on. Eat breakfast then. Eat breakfast. Let me get it. Come on. now, do you? For breakfast.
As familiar with the inside of John's shed as the outside. In fact, in winter time, only ever the inside.
For breakfast.
These robins and generations before have been coming for their regular breakfast.
Come on, get breakfast. Go on. Go on. I'll leave it there for you. Come
And when you see the scene of John on one chair, a robin on the other, you have to ask yourself, who does this shed belong to? Either way, the bond is as mutual and sincere as you'll ever see.
on. I've never been so close to robins.
The early acorn crop sees caching of a very meticulous nature. Not far from the squirrel, allotmenteer and sculptor David, responsible for the statuettes you've seen around the cups, is about to continue his latest work.
What I've done is I've copied an old Roman Latin proverb, pulvis et umbra sumus frugies consumer nati. We are but dust and shadow, born to consume the fruits of the earth. This is meant to represent the circle of life. So you've got the skull and you've got this kind of image of youthfulness and fruit and hair and reverses. Obviously death. Nobody can cheat death. It's sandstone. Yeah, there's a lot of it lying about. Well, you see over there, there's quite a few bits of sandstone I used. I don't know where they came from. I've hidden them all around the garden. Some of them have gone a bit green and covered in moss, but I don't mind that. I think that's nature's reclaiming what was hers.
A sunked bathtub at the edge of the copse provides a lovely pond for the frogs. But under the water, a whole new world is visible. A solar system of pink blobs, each one the size of a pinhead. These are Daphnia, small planktonic freshwater crustaceans, feeding off the leaf litter, of which of course there's plenty, and fascinating when seen up close, like here with high magnification. Transparent, you can see the hearts beating. Simple eyes for light and dark. A whole new world in a sunken bathtub. Not that the frogs seem to mind. the start of September, naively I thought the allotments may slow down, but instead they seem to get busier. Still time for young children to explore, like Thomas here, finding his first fox den.
Mr. Fox! Mr. Fox!
Mr. Fox, though, at the moment is busy with his daughter Smudge. A very late green Finch brood has suffered the attention of passing corvids. Fledglings have been sent tumbling, and some into the long grass. One happily hangs on high in the hawthorn bush. Out of the nest probably 2 to 3 days too early, its incessant chirpings attracting the attentions of a starling.
I don't know whether I might put one of those marrows in that.
With parents nowhere to be seen, the chick attempts to feed itself. The fate of this bird is now in the lap of the gods. The fruit trees are laden. This is a bumper year. And the second generation speckled wood butterflies are making the most of it. The last of the water has been taken from the water butts for the last of the growing crops. And even here, life persists. Backswimmers. Little surface-dwelling predators, waiting for an unsuspecting victim to fall into the water. Dash, currently under the care of Whisky, still appears to have an injury to her hip. She's obviously been gnawing at it to soothe it, but she's moving around and seems to be more comfortable now. Her and her sister still have a tight bond. In fact, they're claiming the wooded copse now as their own, which, seeing as it's a border territory, might mean the dispersal is close by. At the end of this September day, though, Whisky has a dinner date on her mind. Dash returns to the copse. Whisky heads for plot 23. As does Frankie. and Smudge is soon to follow her sister back to the copse. The last of the grass is being mown, and very important signs are up on the memo board. Molly and Graham return for their evening session. For as much as Whisky and Frankie are on the way, they'll be aware the work has to be completed first. And a certain amount of patience is required. Soon enough though, the tools are being packed away. And Molly will return to pick up the treats. Calling in the foxes in the same way she's done for years. And usually Whisky has made the first move. But it's Frankie that'll come the closest. It's been a frenetic year for Frankie, full of trial and tribulation. But through her senior years and all her experience, she's pulled through. Spot enters the neighbouring plot and looks on, possibly moving closer and thinking of the breeding season ahead. Then who's to say that Frankie, in her 7th year, might not have her 4th litter? But within this fox family's world, within the boundaries of Hersal allotments, they surely know one thing. They have friends. So with the dying moments of this late September day, we'll wish Frankie the best. And if this is her final year, I think it can be said that to everybody that's met her, she's left an indelible impression, one which few will forget.